Good morning. Welcome to Staging the Third Act with Jeaninne Eacallier Kato. I'm your host. It's been a while. It's great to be back. Staging the Third Act is by and for boomers who haven't had the privilege or the joy of having their own children for whatever reason. And so I have crafted a show that highlights what we do for our legacies in that we don't have children or grandchildren to pass them on to. And I've so enjoyed doing this show because I'm amazed at the guests that I have that have such independence and creativity and joy for what we are doing into our third acts. So I don't want to mess up when I introduce you to Libby, I don't want to mess up kind of the introduction. So I'm going to do a quick little read to introduce you to her. I'm always fascinated by the strength and independence of my guests, which I just said. Libby Taylor Warden is no exception. I titled this show A Ministry of Experience because Libby was born to be a catalyst for change. Her hard start into adulthood gave her the incentive to find her passion as a mentor, counselor, project manager for Hewlett-Packard, where she taught others how to leverage the use of expert systems, the precursor to AI, and now author. So, without further ado, Libby, it's so great to have you on the show. I so enjoyed getting to know you when we had lunch. We could have talked forever in that restaurant.
I agree.
So,
nice.
if you kind of start off when I said you had kind of a hard start into your adulthood, start there and how that motivated you and spurred you on to the person that you are today.
Well, Jeaninne, thank you for having me on your show today. I had a difficult start. It's not terribly different than a lot of people. There were three of us, three sisters. I was in the middle. Both of my other sisters were born blonde. I was born with brown hair, and so I was dubbed the milkman's daughter. And it's funny because as we all grew older, I looked more like my mother than my other two sisters. So they took after my dad. So, I mean, it's clear that I wasn't. But you know how kids are, even siblings. So I ended up, I didn't run away. I ended up leaving home when I was 16. And of course my family knew where I was, but I left home and I was pretty much on my own from 16 on. So I became independent, quite independent.
So why did you leave so young though? What was the reason that you felt you had to leave?
Well, I did a lot of babysitting, and my sisters, they babysat too, but they spent their money on other things. But I saved my money and got a car. So I became the premier babysitter because I could drive to wherever. And I just got a lot of jobs, and I had a lot of income and a lot of independence having a car. And when my sisters and I got into an argument, actually I got into an argument with our next door neighbor, and my sisters didn't defend me. And what she was saying was wrong, and what I was saying was the truth, but my sisters didn't defend me. And I felt hurt. And I just felt like I didn't fit in. I wasn't loved. I was 16 years old, and I wanted to escape that environment of being misunderstood, which I think is sometimes the most painful thing that can happen to anybody, is to be misunderstood.
Especially a teenager.
Especially a teenager,
right.
Yeah. And so I was different from my sisters in just about any way. I was in GAA, the Girls Athletic Association,
I remember that.
And they were into other things. I was very much a math and science major, and they're both crafty and they bake and they enter things into the fair and win blue ribbons and stuff. And I'm the person that likes to write. We go on sisters retreats now because we're, of course, friends in our later years. But they quilt. They're both quilters. And so they quilt and they put, books on tape going, and I sequester myself in the bedroom and write. And that's my form of activity when we're on a sisters retreat. So we're still, to this day, very different. But we appreciate our differences now, where as teenagers, sibling rivalry, all the things that go on as teenagers, one sister being older, one being younger, the dynamics of the middle.
But it was more than sisters. It was a parental thing too. I mean, you don't leave home at 16 because of your siblings.
My parents divorced about 2 years prior to that, and I was my dad's favorite. And parents shouldn't have favorites. They shouldn't, but they do.
Right.
They don't vocalize them very often, and my parents didn't vocalize them either. But it was just clear to everybody in the family, myself included, that I was my dad's favorite. And that didn't help. When my parents got divorced, I felt isolated.
Yes.
And
you were left with the mom.
My mother was jealous, and I hate to say that, but she was.
Yeah.
And that was played out in my life at different times, where I could see the extent of her jealousy in different aspects, not just my dad. So my mom was jealous, and she wasn't sad to see me go. When I left,
there you go.
I said, I packed up my things and I had my suitcases and things, and I was walking out the door, and I just said, I'm leaving. And she said, okay.
Wow.
She didn't try and stop me. She just was sitting at the kitchen table, and I turned and I said, I'm leaving, and she said, okay. And she was totally, leave, go ahead.
So your instincts were right. It was sort of like, okay, maybe I'm not really wanted here, and I need to get on with my life.
Right. My dad was in real estate, and he sold like vineyards and orchards and big properties. So he traveled all over Northern California. So I was not able to go live with my dad. I visited him at different times, but I went to live with a family that I babysat for and became sort of a live-in, nanny or governess type thing. And that's how I got my start. And I never went back. I mean, a lot of times people leave and then
That's
they go
bold.
back. I've never been back. I mean, I'm back in touch with my family after about 4 or 5 years, but I've been on my own, standing on my own 2 feet ever since.
Wow, that's bold that you never looked back. You just kept going. So how did I know that, like I said in the introduction, that you became a counselor, mentor, even in your career, you led a lot of people. How did that kind of start for you?
Well, interestingly, it started at church. Before I started delving into mentoring in the workplace, because I got into discipleship at church. And when I did that, I had a group, I was in a singles group at church, and there was a man that led the men's discipleship, and I led the women's discipleship. And I had, I don't know, probably 13 or 14 women in that group.
And you were pretty young.
And I was in my mid-20s,
Oh, okay.
25, 26, 27, maybe a little bit later. But I was personally discipling 3 women, and then I had other discipleship groups led by others. And it was all under the auspices of my leadership. And then at work, we started HP Diversified and started getting, I moved from a West Region team to a worldwide team.
Let's back up a little, because I want to go back to when you were a teenager.
Yeah.
You obviously had to find a job. You couldn't just live with people. So what was your first job that kind of opened up the doors for you?
It opened the doors for me. That's perfect phrasing. I was a senior in high school. I was not living at home, and they knew that at school. And when the amusement park came to the school, and they said, we're looking for someone to do payroll.
Oh.
And so they went to the math class, and they said, is there somebody who's exceptionally in math and could do this? Well, I had taken all the math. I used to take math during summer school just to get away from my sisters. So I was taking a math class, but I was the teacher's assistant. So they said, oh, Libby, and she has this difficult living situation. So, because I was living with the people that I babysat for earlier, and they came to me and they said, would you like to work at an amusement park doing payroll? And this is back in the days when you hand wrote the stub on the check.
Yeah.
And it was, carbon, and you wrote through 4 or 5 pages.
That's so random.
You had one piece of
amusement
paper.
Park.
I worked at Frontier Village Amusement Park in South San Jose on Monterey Highway.
Wow.
I worked there for years and did payroll.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and that's how I got my start. That's how I gained further independence, I should say. So I think I mentioned that, I consider myself fiercely independent, which I am working intentionally to back off some of that fierceness. But, you can't be fiercely independent and be married at the same time. You have a husband and they need to feel needed. And
Yes.
I want my husband, I want him to know that I need him. So I back off things like, changing a light bulb or...
But that fierceness is what
yeah,
got you where you are.
absolutely.
And I mean, on your own at such a young age, you have to be fierce. You have to.
There was no one looking out for Libby.
Yeah.
I had to look out for myself.
So from the amusement park, then where did you go from there?
I got a job doing payroll at a company called PMI. My sisters kid me. They say, you worked at PMI and GE and HP. You need to work for a company that has a name, not a bunch of letters. And
Well, what does PMI stand for?
Precision Monolithics Incorporated in Santa Clara. So it was a bit of a drive, but I had a car. So I drove to Precision Monolithics and I worked there for a number of years. I was in a car accident and I was out of work for, about 6 months.
Wow.
I was rear-ended coming home from work one day and had a back injury, so I was out of work for a while. And then when I went back to work, I applied for jobs and I got a job at General Electric. And I worked there for 10 years until they moved. I worked for the, I can't even think of the name of it now. It was the motor division. And we were on the nuclear energy division site, but it was the motor division, and that's where I worked. And they transferred back to Hendersonville, Tennessee, which was when I said, well, they didn't ask me to transfer with them. I had gone from being a foot in the door payroll, and then I did secretarial work in the engineering department, and then I moved into the supervisor of the engineering documentation. But they still didn't ask me to move to Hendersonville, Tennessee. It was not one of the paid moves. So I looked for work and I found a job at Hewlett Packard, and that's when I switched. So I was late 29, I think, when I went to work.
So when did Aunt Libby happen?
Oh my goodness, Aunt Libby. I met a friend at General Electric. Her daughters, who are now in their late 30s, they call me Aunt Libby. But I also have that distinction of Aunt Libby from my neighborhood. When I lived in Rockland, we all moved in about the same time, brand new homes, so everybody was new and we all kind of knew each other, met each other at the mailbox, and I walked my dog and everybody knew. Well, for a while I was Button's mom. That was my name, because Button, everybody knew Button. But there was a time when we had a block party, and there was a game between the kids and the adults, like a father-son or mother-daughter, that kind of thing. And this one family had 3 kids. And so they said, Libby, would you be the parent that goes with one of our children to do this game? And they had blocked off the street. We lived on a courtyard, so they blocked off the street and we were playing games in the street. So in order for that to be official, I had to be Aunt Libby. And from that point on, I was like the guardian angel over all the kids in the neighborhood. I lived right in the corner, so the school was a kitty corner across the street. So if there was a bully running after any of the children, they ran to my house. Everybody came to my house for Halloween. It was like, hello, Aunt Libby. And they all showed me their costumes, and really, it was like, I took pictures of them,
But didn't you say there was one boy that got, or?
There was a little boy who, he found a skateboard, and it turned out that there were these other kids that were playing with the skateboard, but they had left and gone away. Like you would, accidentally leave something, like kids will leave their coat and come home and go, I don't know where I lost it. Well, they had left the skateboard, so he picked it up. And as soon as he saw them running and they were yelling at him, he dropped the skateboard, but they kept running after him. So he ran to my house, and I protected him. There was another time when a young girl, just newly licensed, I was walking my dog before I went to work, and she pulled up to the intersection, which is right outside my house, and there were 2 junior high girls walking across the street. And they, as kids do, they don't pay attention to other cars and may not be considerate of other drivers. They were just walking at their pace. Well, this 16-year-old didn't like that. So she revved her engine, drove around them, missed them by less than a foot. I mean, they jumped. That's how
Wow.
scared they were. And she went around by my house, made an illegal U-turn, and parked on the sidewalk. So it was like illegal after illegal after illegal, you know. And I did a citizen's arrest. I reached it. She left her car running to run into the house behind me and get the girl who would take her to school. I reached in, turned the engine off, and kept the keys. And everybody on the block was like, "Thank you for protecting our children," because they lived on my street in the courtyard. And of course, I had to go to court, you know, because the policeman came. I called 911. I had my phone because I was on a conference call with Hewlett Packard, and I just discontinued the call and called 911. And the police came, but because they hadn't witnessed it, I had to sign the report, so I had to go to court. But of course, the mother of this young girl was furious.
Oh, of course.
But you know, I was the protector of the kids in the neighborhood. I would have done that even if I wasn't Aunt Libby. I would have done that. This young girl put those two children in jeopardy.
Oh, absolutely.
And being the way I grew up and feeling like I didn't have a protector after my dad left. There's two pet peeves I have in my life. It's taking advantage of children and children that are not protected, and pets and animals, because they rely on their masters to protect them,
absolutely,
to feed them, to whatever. And so pets and children. And I mean, I've gotten to the point where if there's a terrible news thing going on, I'll turn the TV off or I'll turn the radio off. Sure. I can't even listen to it because it strikes me so emotionally. Because I can't stand to see children abused in any way, shape, or form. And that was abuse to those two young girls in junior high school.
Oh, absolutely.
And by a 16-year-old who's only maybe 3 or 4 years older than them. But she needed to learn.
Yeah, she did.
And her mother...
And a lot of people wouldn't have stepped up. They would have just ignored it.
A lot of people wouldn't have, but I did.
Yeah.
And I'm never sorry that I did. I'm not sure doing a citizen's arrest is something I would do again, unless it was children, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff. But I felt the need to do that.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you also probably saved her life by the reckless way she was driving.
She learned a lesson. Well, actually, she learned it before the police got there, because I said, it is illegal to go through a crosswalk when there are people in it.
Yeah.
She said, I never learned that. And I said, well, just because you didn't learn it doesn't mean it's not a law.
Yeah.
And by the time the police got there, she said, they were no longer they were on the sidewalk. And I thought, I can get the mothers of these two girls, and I can have the girls, you know, write an affidavit. I mean, I almost did that for the court date, because I thought, they jumped. They were so frightened.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of sets up, so now you're working at GE for 10 years, and then you get an opportunity at Hewlett Packard. Mind you, you've had no formal training in college. You're getting these fabulous jobs because of your skills. Mm-hmm. And obviously you have a lot of leadership abilities. So what was your position at Hewlett Packard? It's called Black Belt Human Performance Technologist.
Well, that's what I was in later years. My foot in the door after working at General Electric, because as I said, they were leaving, going to Tennessee, and I needed to get a job locally. So I applied for a job as a secretary in the IT department, and that was my first job. You know, when you're there for over 30 years, you transition in and out of various different jobs. Mm-hmm. So I started as a secretary because I was single, and all the other women that were secretaries, we had kind of a co-op of all the women, and we shared and trained each other, because you really can't train a secretary by being a manager. Only another secretary can train a secretary. Sure. So we had a buddy system. And they all had to go home at night and fix meals for their families. And so I took night classes. HP had night classes, and on IT and other technologies that we needed in the office to be a secretary. I took night classes, and I came back, and then I taught them what I was learning. And then my manager eventually set aside one of the conference rooms and set it up with some computers. This is back in 1982, 1983, so they weren't real fancy computers.
Right.
They were these little tiny
Sure, I
HP
remember
150s,
those.
you know. But yeah, IBM hadn't even come out with their PC in those days. I mean, that's how far back we're going here, technology-wise.
Right.
So he set up a little room for me. I had 4 little computers, and I taught the secretaries. And because I had that room, when that division started to evolve and transfer to Roseville, there were a lot of people that didn't want to move to Roseville, so they needed to be retrained. This was the corporate parts center, and a lot of people sat at terminals and they didn't know how to use PCs, so they needed to have some training on PCs. So I became a trainer within the IT department to train people to transition them into other jobs. In those days, HP didn't lay off people. This was back in the 80s. They didn't start laying off people till the early 2000s.
Oh, 2000s.
Yeah, so we just found other jobs. We believed that people had skills. In fact, I think I shared with you, I taught a class on the HP way when I got to Roseville years later. I didn't move back in the 80s because we were hiring so many people from various different jobs, and we wanted to retain the culture of Hewlett-Packard. And they didn't know, there was not enough former HP people to have the culture transition via osmosis. So I taught a class called the HP way. And everybody new hire to HP in the last year had to go through that class. So it was really interesting.
Did you create that class?
I created the class. I didn't create the HP way.
I know,
the
but you
HP
created
way.
the class to teach it?
I designed the curriculum.
See? I mean, there's incentive, there's motivation, there's leadership.
I've always been in a position of, even when I lived in the Bay Area before moving to Roseville, I had come up through the training world, beginning with that 4 computers in a class teaching secretaries, and I moved into design and development of computer-based training back in those days. And then I did both online training, and then I also did live training of customer engineers. Customer engineers are the people that go out to the customer site and repair or install equipment. And when we got a new piece of equipment, we needed to share with them, what were the differences from the old piece. Sometimes they just wanted to know where were the 4 screws to take the cover off so we don't look like a fool.
How did you get into learning all this being a secretary?
Well, I started as a secretary.
But then you started learning...
At a company like Hewlett-Packard, back in the 80s and 90s, if you showed initiative, that made a huge difference, and I was interested in learning more.
So
having gone to classes at night,
Did you get promoted?
I got promoted a number of times.
Oh, okay.
I probably held, in 30 years, I probably held 13, 14 positions.
Wow.
Yeah, and all but one, they came to me and asked me to apply.
Wow.
There's only one position that I actually applied for, sought out a change, and applied for the job. All the others, they said, Libby, here's a job. We've got some applicants coming in. This is the day to stop. And would you consider applying for this job? We think you would be good. And so most all of my promotions came from people thinking.
Yeah, I come from the world of education, so it's a whole different...
A different culture.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are in the education world. And being a trainer, they say, how do I get a job at HP if I'm tired of the bureaucracy or the whatever? And I tell them training and education are really quite different. Mm-hmm. Because in education, it's how much can I teach them, and you have, like, in 9 months, you've got that period of time mm-hmm. to get as much as you can going through this curriculum. Mm-hmm. And in the training world, it's what is the least they need to know to get them out of the classroom and back on their desk.
Wow.
And
it's
so
more
you
technical.
had job aids, you had online resources, and you teach them how to use their job aids and their resources. And you teach them the business need for the knowledge. That's, you open every training class understanding the business need, and then you teach them where the resources are and the basic generic process, and then you send them back out to their desk. And then the trainers and other people are their mentors. So they go out and they answer questions as they encounter.
I can't believe this. I feel like we've been only sitting here for 5 minutes. We have only 5 minutes left.
Oh my goodness.
So I want to talk about
Sure.
your books.
Oh,
I want to
yeah.
talk about, so we know that you're adept at everything you do. And I want to talk about you in 5 minutes as a writer. So the books, and how did you get into writing?
I've always loved writing. I've always loved reading, and reading has led me to want to write. I remember I outlined my first book probably in the late 90s. And I did a complete outline of the book that I wanted to write. And I don't know if you're familiar with I call it the ebb and flow of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, certain hours of the day you're more creative than others. And
Absolutely.
I felt like I was giving all of my creative energy to Hewlett Packard. And so when I retired early, I retired when I was 60. They offered an early retirement, hence, you know, and I had over 30 years and over the age limit that they required, so I retired early because I wanted to write. And I had been to numerous writing conferences prior to that,
Yes.
but I had never published anything aside from, well, trade magazines and Christian magazine articles and, you know, blogs, things like that. But I'd never produced a book. So I had never been able, and I wanted to do a book of devotionals. And then back in the late 80s, early 90s, devotionals were kind of at a low ebb.
Uh-huh.
You either had to submit to a real popular devotional, but to create a book of 365-day devotionals was not popular. Today it's coming back, but in the 90s it wasn't. So I decided to do something different. Actually, I did a screenplay, and I went to a writer's conference, and there was a man there that taught a workshop he was a screenwriter in Hollywood, and he also wrote fiction books. And so I went to his workshop, and when he saw, the first exercise in the workshop was how to create drama amongst your characters. Well, my first screenplay was for a Christmas musical at a church.
Wow.
So the main characters were God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. So obviously there's no tension. He leaned over and he said, "Libby, that's not going to work. You have to come up with something else." And I thought, okay, write about what you know. And my husband and I do motorcycle ministry. So I thought, I'll write a book about motorcycle ministry, a fiction book. And later in that conference, I was interviewed by someone, and this editor for a publishing house, Harvest House, he approached me and he said, "If you write an Amish girl into your book, send me your manuscript."
Oh,
and in the
wow.
writing world,
That's unheard
you never
of.
hear an editor.
I went to so many conferences pitching my work, and they said, "Just send it to us, we'll get back to you." But never have I ever said to somebody, "I want it."
Yeah, and that's why, and I would talk to some people and they say, you never hear, "Send me," an editor say, "Send me your manuscript."
Yeah.
Well, I had just started writing fiction. I knew nothing about writing fiction, absolutely nothing. And I learned later, through the course of taking workshops and going to conferences, that it's about a 10-year learning curve to write well.
Yes.
To really write well.
Yeah, that's about right.
Fiction.
That's
Yeah.
about right.
So I had nothing to send him for a while. And he has since moved on, so he's not with the house that publishes a lot of Amish books. And I realized in the motorcycle world, there's not a lot of Amish girls. So I thought, that's really not my target audience. So I kind of changed it. My main character, her father was Amish, and he was shunned from the Amish community to marry her mother and so on. So she had a lot of the core values in and around growing up, but she was not Amish herself. So I had to, make some changes in the book. Okay, so the book is, there's a little motorcycle right here. The book is called Port of Refuge. I created a village, or a small fishing village in Northern California called Puerto Refugio, typical California name. And that's where the book takes place for the last 2/3 of the book. The first third of the book, she lives in Shipshewana, Indiana, which is where she grew up. And she escapes, runs away, and ends up in Southern California, realizes she's involved, kind of remotely connected to this outlaw motorcycle group, and runs away again, and restarts her life in Port of Refuge, or Puerto Refugio. So and the book covers everything from a young girl in her 20 years old running away, it also covers she in a situation she found herself in and jeopardized her safety in that situation. She found herself pregnant. She loses the baby, so it covers infertility. And
Don't tell all the juicy
well,
bits.
I mean, just saying, these are the things that happen to her in the first third of the book. Is, you know, she rebels. She wants to be an artist. Her parents want her to come back to Shipshewana and be an art teacher. She wants to be an artist. So it covers all sorts of things that young girls go through at the age of 20.
Would you say that's young adult?
I would say it's I don't think it's YA. When you start at age 20, and it covers about a year and a half of her life. So when you start at age 20, it kind of ages out of the young adult arena.
Yeah.
But it is, it's the kind of book you might want to give to a 16 or 17-year-old because she rebels. And how many 16 or 17-year-olds, hello, Libby, rebel and run away?
Write what you know.
You know, write about what you know. So,
that's right.
But she does end up getting back involved in motorcycle ministry. And she ends up at the very end of the book going back to her family and getting reconnected. And there's a love story that runs through it, so I won't tell you about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the book ends.
Well, this has been really, I can't believe how fast the time has gone. It's crazy.
Sorry, it has gone, it's flown by.
I know. You're so interesting. Your life is so interesting. And I mean, you're a very strong person, obviously. And I really believe that our pasts and how we can either crumble from our past, or we can pick ourselves up and say, no, I'm going to make something of it.
And I think everybody is the sum total of their experiences. And when you make all your experiences, even the bad ones, I mean, I cried many, many hours over things that happened in my early years. But if you continue to proceed with your life, you look back and you think those things molded who I am.
Absolutely.
So I look at them as, I mean, like I say, I cried many tears over them, but I look at them now as part of what made me who I am today.
And then you can see the opportunities that arise.
And I actually have gratitude for those experiences.
Yes.
I'm grateful for them.
Absolutely.
And for having come through them.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Well, this has been great, and thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again with my next show. Again, thank you, Libby Taylor Warden.
And by the way, this is published by Libby Taylor. I dropped the word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Great.
that's my maiden name.
Yes. And we'll see you next time.